Your soul has already chosen where it will go in the first moments after your death, and Edgar Cayce, in his trance states, revealed that most people end up in dimensions they never expected, facing truths about their lives they desperately tried to ignore. In thousands of psychic readings given between the 1920s and 1940s, Cayce described in startling detail what happens to consciousness in the critical first year after the body dies, and his revelations shatter nearly everything mainstream religion teaches about the afterlife. The sleeping prophet explained that your destination isn't determined by beliefs you claim or prayers you recite, but by the actual spiritual frequency you've cultivated through your daily thoughts, actions, and intentions while alive. Right now, in this very moment, you're building the exact dimensional reality you'll inhabit when your heart stops beating. What Cayce saw will force you to examine whether the life you're living today is preparing your soul for ascension or condemning it to lower astral planes of confusion and suffering. Drop a comment sharing what you believe determines where consciousness goes after death. This conversation could change someone's eternity. Edgar Cayce didn't just glimpse the afterlife, he mapped it with the precision of a cartographer charting unexplored continents. For over 40 years, this unassuming photographer from Kentucky would enter deep trance states and describe the journey of human consciousness after physical death with such consistent, detailed accuracy that researchers are still studying his readings today. What he revealed about the first year after death presents a vision of the afterlife that's simultaneously more complex and more logical than anything found in traditional religious doctrine. This isn't about harps and clouds or lakes of fire. This is about the actual mechanics of consciousness transitioning between dimensions and the spiritual laws that govern where your soul goes based on who you truly became during your life on Earth. Cayce explained that death itself is not an ending, but a birth into a different state of existence. The moment your physical heart stops, consciousness doesn't blink out or sleep. It immediately awakens in a dimension that corresponds to the spiritual vibration you've been emitting throughout your life. Think of it like a radio that's been broadcasting on a specific frequency for decades. When the physical transmitter shuts down, the signal doesn't disappear. It simply continues operating on whatever wavelength it was already tuned to. Your thoughts, your intentions, your treatment of others, your spiritual practices or lack thereof, all of these have been setting your frequency, and that frequency determines your initial destination. In his readings, Cayce described multiple planes or dimensions of existence that surround the Earth, layered like invisible spheres of consciousness. These aren't physical places with geography, they're states of being, realms of thought and spiritual development. The lowest planes are dark, confused, earthbound dimensions where souls who lived entirely for material gratification, who cultivated hatred, or who refused all spiritual development, find themselves trapped in mental prisons of their own creation. These souls often don't even realize they've died. They're so identified with physical reality, so attached to their bodies and possessions and earthly concerns, that they linger near the earth plane, trying desperately to interact with the physical world they can no longer affect. Cayce saw souls in these lower astral planes experiencing the mental equivalent of their earthly addictions and obsessions, replaying their worst moments in endless loops, unable to move forward because they never developed the spiritual strength to transcend their basest desires. But here's what most people miss. Cayce was absolutely clear that no external God or divine judge sends souls to these lower planes. You send yourself there through the consciousness you've built. The universe doesn't punish, it reflects. If you've spent your entire life focused exclusively on accumulating wealth, on dominating others, on satisfying every physical craving without a single thought for spiritual growth or service to others, you've tuned your consciousness to a low, heavy frequency. When you die, that frequency is all you have, and it places you automatically in the dimensional plane that matches it. The law is mechanical, impersonal, absolutely just. You don't go to hell because you broke commandments. You create your own hell by becoming a person whose consciousness can't vibrate at a higher level. Now, contrast that with souls who spent their lives cultivating compassion, seeking spiritual understanding, serving others, and trying to align their will with divine purpose. Cayce described these souls entering realms of light, beauty, and expanded consciousness immediately upon death. They experience what he called the borderland, a transitional dimension where they meet guides, deceased loved ones, and spiritual teachers who help orient them to their new state of existence. In this borderland, which Cayce said most people experience for varying lengths of time, the soul begins to understand the full truth of what their life on earth actually accomplished. They see their entire life from a cosmic perspective, understanding the ripple effects of their actions, the real motivations behind their choices, the opportunities they seized or squandered for spiritual growth. This life review is one of the most crucial experiences of the first year after death, and Cayce's descriptions of it should terrify anyone who's been living unconsciously. The review isn't presented by an angry deity. It emerges from your own soul's connection to the Akashic records, the cosmic library that contains the complete record of every thought, word, and deed of every soul throughout all time. In the life review, you don't just remember what you did, you experience it from every perspective. You feel the exact pain you caused others. You experience the joy you brought or failed to bring. You see the moments where your soul was trying to grow, trying to learn specific lessons, and you see clearly whether you cooperated with that growth or resisted it. You understand which relationships were soul contracts meant to teach you crucial lessons, and whether you learned those lessons or avoided them. You see the difference between your soul's intended purpose for that lifetime and what you actually chose to do with your time on earth. Are you living in a way that your future self, reviewing this life from the other side, will be proud of? Or are you going to see yourself wasting precious years on pursuits that meant nothing spiritually, ignoring your true purpose, hurting people you should have loved, and choosing comfort over growth at every turn? The life review is not metaphorical. Cayce saw it happening to every soul, and it determines everything about where you go next. After the life review comes a period of rest and adjustment that Cayce described lasting anywhere from days to months in Earth time, though time itself works differently in these dimensions. During this period, souls begin to gravitate toward the specific plane that matches their spiritual development. Cayce identified several major planes, and he was clear that most people don't go to the highest or lowest extremes. The vast majority of souls enter intermediate dimensions, where they continue learning, growing, and preparing for their next experience. These intermediate planes aren't static. Souls there engage in study, service, and spiritual development. They work with teachers and guides. They sometimes observe and try to help loved ones still living on Earth. They begin to understand the broader journey of their soul across multiple lifetimes, seeing how the life they just completed fits into a much larger pattern of growth toward eventual reunion with the divine. But Cayce revealed something that most spiritual teachings ignore. Not all souls progress smoothly through these planes. Some become stuck, attached to earthly concerns, even while technically in higher dimensions. Others advance quickly because they've been preparing spiritually for decades before death. The first year after death is a critical period of orientation and decision. Souls begin to understand what they need to learn next, what karmic debts they've created that must be balanced, what soul wounds they need to heal before they can progress further. They start making choices about their next incarnation, if they're on the path of reincarnation, or they prepare for continued development in the spiritual planes if they've evolved beyond the need for physical embodiment. Here's where Cayce's revelations become intensely personal and challenging. He taught that the dimension you enter at death and your experiences in that first year are entirely the result of the person you chose to become during your life, not the person you pretended to be. Not the religious identity you claimed. The actual vibrational frequency of your consciousness, which is determined by your habitual thoughts, your real motivations, your treatment of others, and your genuine relationship with the divine. You can attend church every Sunday and end up in a lower astral plane if your heart is filled with judgment, greed, and self-righteousness. You can claim no religious affiliation whatsoever and enter realms of light if you've lived with genuine compassion, honesty, and spiritual seeking. The question you need to ask yourself right now is brutal in its simplicity. If you died today, what dimension would your consciousness be vibrating at? Strip away all your rationalizations, all your excuses, all your carefully constructed self-image. Look at how you actually spend your time, what you actually think about, how you actually treat people when no one's watching. What truly motivates your choices? Are you growing spiritually or stagnating? Are you serving something larger than yourself or living entirely for personal comfort and pleasure? Are you healing your wounds and becoming more loving, or are you nursing grievances and hardening your heart? The honest answers to these questions tell you exactly where you're headed. Cayce also revealed that the first year after death is when souls most intensely experience the consequences of what he called soul development, or lack thereof during life. Souls who cultivated spiritual practices, meditation, prayer, selfless service, study of spiritual truths, find they have abilities and freedoms in the afterlife that less developed souls completely lack. They can move more easily between planes. They can perceive higher spiritual realities. They can communicate more clearly with guides and teachers. They understand what's happening to them and why. Meanwhile, souls who lived entirely for material concerns, who never meditated, never prayed with genuine devotion, never served others, never sought to understand spiritual laws, find themselves confused, limited, unable to perceive the very guides and opportunities that surround them. They're like people who never learned to read being handed a library of books that could free them. The resources are there, but they lack the developed capacity to use them. This is why Cayce was so insistent that spiritual development isn't something you can postpone until some hypothetical future moment of convenience. Every day you're alive, you're either building spiritual muscle or allowing it to atrophy. Every meditation session, every act of genuine service, every moment of choosing love over fear, every instance of seeking wisdom over comfort, these aren't just nice activities for religious people. They're the actual training that prepares your consciousness for what comes after death. When your body dies, you don't suddenly gain new spiritual abilities you never developed. You have exactly what you built during your life, and that determines everything about your experience in those crucial first months and years of existence in the spiritual dimensions. If you've enjoyed this exploration of Edgar Cayce's revelations about the afterlife, I'd love for you to show your support by hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel so you don't miss future videos diving deep into these transformative spiritual teachings. Your engagement helps this content reach others who are genuinely seeking spiritual truth. One of the most challenging aspects of Cayce's teachings about the first year after death involves what happens to souls who die unexpectedly or traumatically. In his readings, Cayce explained that the manner of death doesn't change the fundamental spiritual laws, but it can affect the initial transition. Souls who die suddenly in accidents sometimes experience a period of confusion, not understanding immediately that they've left their bodies. Souls who die in states of extreme fear, anger, or despair can carry those emotional states into the early afterlife, creating difficult conditions for themselves until they're able to calm and accept help from guides. This is why the spiritual state you maintain daily is so crucial. You don't know when death will come. The consciousness you're cultivating right now might be the exact consciousness you carry into your first moments in the spiritual dimensions. Are you living in a state of peace, trust, and spiritual awareness? Or are you constantly anxious, angry, fearful, or spiritually asleep? Cayce also revealed that souls in their first year after death often attempt to communicate with loved ones still living, and these attempts are sometimes successful when living people are receptive and spiritually sensitive. Dreams are one of the primary channels. Deceased souls, particularly those on higher planes who understand how to work with these subtle energies, can visit loved ones during sleep and provide comfort, guidance, or even warnings about future events. Cayce gave numerous readings describing these dream visitations as genuine soul-to-soul communications, not mere psychological phenomena. He encouraged people to pay attention to vivid dreams of deceased loved ones, to pray for those who have passed, and to maintain loving thoughts toward them, as these positive energies can actually assist souls in their afterlife journey, particularly if they're struggling in lower planes. But here's something that should shake you to your core. Cayce taught that while prayer and positive thoughts from living people can help deceased souls, The most important factor in a soul's afterlife experience is always the spiritual development they achieved during their own lifetime. You can't praise someone into heaven if they've created a consciousness that vibrates at a hellish frequency. You can send love and light to a deceased soul struggling in lower planes, and that energy can help them become aware of opportunities to move toward the light. But ultimately, each soul must choose to grow, to let go of earthly attachments, to forgive, to seek higher understanding. No external force can override the law of spiritual vibration and correspondence. You end up where you've tuned yourself to be. This brings us to one of Cayce's most profound and most ignored teachings. Preparation for death is one of the most important spiritual practices you can engage in while alive, yet almost no one does it. Not preparation in the sense of writing a will or planning a funeral. Preparation of consciousness. Cayce recommended regular meditation, specifically focused on accepting the reality of death, on releasing attachment to physical form, on cultivating trust in the spiritual journey, on strengthening your connection to the divine while you still have a body. He taught that those who live with conscious awareness of their mortality, who regularly contemplate the impermanence of physical life and the eternal nature of the soul, who practice releasing control and surrendering to divine will, these people have vastly easier transitions at death. They're not surprised. They're not resistant. They move smoothly into the light because they've been preparing for this journey their entire lives. How often do you contemplate your own death? Not in a morbid, fearful way, but in a spiritually mature way that acknowledges the absolute certainty that your physical body will die and asks the crucial question, is my soul ready? Most people live in complete denial of death, pushing away any thought of mortality, filling every moment with distractions, never doing the deep spiritual work of preparing for the most important transition of their existence. Then death comes suddenly, and they're utterly unprepared, confused, resistant, clinging desperately to a physical world they can no longer inhabit. Cayce saw this pattern repeated endlessly, and he begged people to wake up and prepare while they still had time. The first year after death is also when souls begin to understand the full reality of reincarnation and karma, if they haven't grasped these truths during physical life. Cayce taught that souls in the afterlife receive instruction about the law of cause and effect, about how the energy they put out during their earth life must eventually return to them, about debts they've created that need balancing, about lessons they failed to learn that must be mastered in future lives. Souls on higher planes, working with advanced guides and teachers, begin planning their next incarnation if they're on the reincarnational path. They identify the specific lessons they need to learn, the karmic patterns they need to break, the soul qualities they need to develop. They choose the general circumstances of their next birth, not every detail, but the broad framework that will provide the optimal conditions for their continued growth. And here's what should terrify you. Cayce revealed that the challenges you face in your current life, the difficult relationships, the painful circumstances, the obstacles that seem unfair or undeserved, these were very likely chosen by your own soul before birth as exactly what you needed for your spiritual evolution. Your higher self, working with spiritual guides in the time between your last death and this birth, looked at your soul's development and said, "This is what I need to experience to grow. These are the lessons I must learn. This is the karma I need to balance." You chose this life. Not consciously, not with your surface personality, but with your eternal soul that understands the bigger picture of your spiritual journey across multiple lifetimes. So when you complain about your circumstances, when you rage against the difficulties of your life, when you play the victim and blame others for your problems, you're actually resisting the very lessons your own soul chose to learn in this lifetime. You're wasting the precious opportunity you specifically designed for yourself. The question isn't, why is this happening to me? The question is, what is my soul trying to learn through this experience, and am I cooperating with that growth or fighting it? In the first year after death, you're going to see with crystal clarity which opportunities you seized and which you wasted, which lessons you learned and which you avoided. The regret of seeing a wasted lifetime, of understanding that you had everything you needed to evolve spiritually, but chose comfort and ego gratification instead. Cayce described this regret as one of the most painful experiences a soul can have. Let me be direct with you. If you're watching this video, your soul brought you here for a reason. Something in you is seeking spiritual truth, wanting to understand the bigger picture, feeling the urgency of waking up before it's too late. Don't ignore that impulse. Don't let the distractions of daily life pull you back into unconsciousness. The teachings Edgar Cayce brought through aren't entertainment. They're a roadmap for soul development, a warning about the consequences of spiritual negligence, and an invitation to begin living consciously in alignment with your true divine purpose. The first year after your death is coming, whether you're ready or not. What you do with the time you have left in this physical body will determine everything about that experience. Cayce taught that souls who have lived spiritually conscious lives, who've meditated regularly, who've served others genuinely, who've sought truth and tried to embody love, these souls often experience the first year after death as a revelation of beauty, wisdom, and expanded consciousness beyond anything possible in physical form. They meet spiritual teachers of extraordinary development. They're given access to cosmic knowledge about the nature of reality, the structure of the universe, the history of souls, the ultimate destiny of consciousness returning to full unity with God. They experience dimensions of existence where thought creates instantly, where communication happens through pure transfer of meaning without words, where love is a tangible force more real than physical matter ever was. They begin to remember their existence before physical birth, their journey through previous lifetimes, their true nature as eternal spiritual beings temporarily inhabiting physical form. This is what's waiting for those who do the work of spiritual development while alive. But this same period can be a nightmare for those who've lived unconsciously. Cayce described souls trapped in lower astral planes, unable to understand what's happening to them, sometimes not even realizing they've died, wandering in darkness and confusion, experiencing the mental equivalent of their worst earthly states magnified because there's no physical body to limit the intensity of emotion and thought. These souls aren't being punished by God. They're experiencing the natural consequence of never developing their spiritual faculties, of never tuning their consciousness to higher frequencies, of building an entire identity around temporary physical reality that no longer exists for them. They're stuck until they either learn to call out for help and accept the assistance of guides who are always trying to reach them, or until the sheer misery of their condition finally breaks through their resistance and forces them to begin seeking light. Before we continue, I want to invite you to actively engage with this spiritual community by liking this video if it's resonating with you and subscribing to the channel for more deep explorations of Edgar Cayce's transformative teachings. And most importantly, drop a comment sharing your thoughts about preparing for death consciously. Your reflection might be exactly what another soul needs to hear today. Toward the end of the first year after death, Cayce taught that most souls have settled into the plane that matches their spiritual development and have begun the work of continued evolution. Some are studying with teachers, learning spiritual laws they never understood during physical life. Others are engaged in service, helping souls in lower planes or even trying to assist those still living on Earth. Advanced souls might be preparing to incarnate again with clear missions to serve humanity. And there are souls who remain earthbound, still attached, still learning the painful lesson that you cannot cling to what no longer exists, that growth requires letting go, that the journey is always forward, never backward. The critical insight from Cayce's readings is that the first year after death isn't some separate experience disconnected from your life. It's the direct continuation and revelation of exactly who you became during your physical existence. Death doesn't change you, it reveals you. It strips away all pretense, all social masks, all the lies you told yourself about who you are and what matters. You stand naked in your true spiritual state, and that state determines everything. There's no bargaining, no last-minute conversion, no cheating the system. The law is absolute. Consciousness of a certain quality gravitates to the dimension that matches it. You become what you practice, and what you've practiced during life is what you are at death. So the real question this video should be forcing you to confront isn't what happens in the first year after death. The question is, what am I doing right now to prepare my consciousness for that transition? What spiritual practices am I engaged in daily? How am I treating other people? What am I feeding my mind? What is the actual frequency of my thoughts, my emotions, my intentions? Am I growing toward the light or sinking toward darkness? These aren't abstract religious questions. They're practical inquiries about the mechanics of consciousness and spiritual law that will determine your experience of the most important transition of your existence. Edgar Cayce saw the afterlife with the clear vision of someone who could perceive beyond physical reality. He brought back detailed reports of dimensions most people never imagine exist. He described the consequences of spiritual development and spiritual negligence with unflinching honesty. He revealed that the universe operates according to precise laws of vibration, correspondence, and cause and effect, laws that govern what happens to consciousness after death, just as surely as gravity governs what happens to a dropped stone. You cannot escape these laws. You can only work with them or suffer the consequences of ignoring them. Your soul came to this earth with a mission, with lessons to learn, with specific growth to achieve. You've been given this lifetime, these circumstances, these relationships, these challenges, as the perfect curriculum for your spiritual evolution. The question that will haunt you in your first year after death is simple and devastating. Did you do the work? Did you learn the lessons? Did you grow spiritually? Did you serve love? Did you seek truth? Did you try to align your will with divine purpose? Or did you waste it all chasing things that meant nothing, avoiding discomfort, living unconsciously, telling yourself there would always be more time? There won't always be more time. Death comes for everyone, usually without warning, often without mercy. The life you're living right now is preparing you for either a beautiful transition into light and expanded consciousness, or a difficult, confusing, painful experience in lower planes of existence. That choice is being made not in some future moment of decision, but right now, in this present moment, through the consciousness you're cultivating with every thought, every choice, every action. Edgar Cayce's greatest gift wasn't just describing what happens after death. It was revealing that you have the power right now to determine the quality of that experience by choosing to wake up spiritually and live consciously in alignment with your soul's true purpose. Your thoughts aren't just floating ideas in your head. According to Edgar Cayce's psychic readings, they're living forces actively constructing the reality you'll experience tomorrow, next month, and even in your next lifetime. While you've been casually thinking whatever crosses your mind, Cayce warned that every single thought you generate is a creative act, literally building the circumstances, relationships, and spiritual challenges you'll face. Most people live their entire lives, never realizing they're unconsciously architecting their own suffering or salvation through the relentless mental chatter they barely notice. The thoughts you're having right now, in this very moment, are already setting events into motion on planes of existence you can't see but will inevitably encounter. What if your current circumstances, the relationships that frustrate you, the opportunities that elude you, the patterns that keep repeating, aren't random at all, but precise manifestations of thought forms you created weeks, months, or even years ago? Share in the comments. What recurring thought pattern do you suspect has been quietly building your current reality? Edgar Cayce didn't just suggest that thoughts matter through thousands of psychic readings conducted while in deep trance states. He revealed that thought is the fundamental creative force of the universe, the same power God used to speak creation into existence. When Cayce said, "Thoughts are things," he wasn't being poetic or metaphorical. He was describing the actual metaphysical mechanics of how reality itself operates. Every thought you think, he explained, creates a vibration that moves through multiple dimensions of existence, setting up patterns and attracting circumstances that must eventually materialize in your physical experience. You're not a passive observer of reality. You're its constant, tireless creator. But here's what makes this teaching so unsettling. You've been creating unconsciously. For years, possibly your entire life, you've been throwing thought after thought into the universe without realizing each one was a blueprint, a command, an order placed with cosmic forces that must fulfill it. Cayce revealed that the law governing this process is absolute and impersonal. It doesn't care whether your thoughts are positive or negative, constructive or destructive, aligned with your soul's purpose or completely opposed to it. The law simply responds. It creates. It manifests. Think about the implications. that recurring worry about money. You've been ordering poverty, that persistent belief that you're not good enough. You've been constructing experiences that confirm your inadequacy, that fear that people will betray you. You've been magnetizing betrayers into your life. Cayce explained that the universe has no choice but to give you exactly what you're consistently thinking about, because thought is the language of creation itself. Your mind is speaking constantly, and reality is listening. In his readings, Cayce described how thought forms work across dimensions. When you think, you're not just having a private mental experience, you're broadcasting a frequency into the mental plane, where that thought takes on a kind of existence. It becomes a living entity, what some esoteric traditions call a thought form or elemental. This thought form has energy, intention, and a drive to manifest itself in the material world. The more you think the same thought, the stronger this form becomes. Feed it with emotion and it becomes powerful beyond measure. Give it sustained attention and it becomes nearly unstoppable. This is why Cayce was so insistent that people understand the creative power they wield through their minds. He said that every soul is a co-creator with God, gifted with the same creative faculty that brought the universe into being. But most souls use this gift unconsciously, carelessly, even destructively. They think thoughts of limitation, fear, resentment, and victimhood, never realizing they're actively constructing the very limitations and fears they're experiencing. The spiritual danger here is profound. According to Cayce's readings, thoughts don't just affect your current lifetime, they echo across incarnations. The thought patterns you establish now create karmic momentum that follows your soul into future lives. If you spend this lifetime thinking thoughts of greed, those thought forms will create circumstances in your next life where you experience the effects of greed. If you habitually think thoughts of judgment and condemnation toward others, you'll incarnate into situations where you're judged and condemned. The law is perfect in its justice. You receive exactly what you create. But Cayce also revealed the liberating truth hidden within this teaching. If thought created your current circumstances, thought can change them. You're not trapped. You're not a victim of fate or bad luck or other people's choices. You're experiencing the materialization of your own mental creations, which means you have the power to create something entirely different. The moment you change your habitual thought patterns, you begin altering the architecture of your future reality. This isn't about positive thinking as some superficial technique. Cayce was describing something far deeper, the conscious alignment of your mind with divine will. He explained that when your thoughts are aligned with Christ consciousness, with love, compassion, service, and spiritual truth, you become a channel for divine creative power. Your thoughts then create circumstances that serve your soul's evolution and the greater good. When your thoughts are aligned with ego, fear, and separation, you create circumstances that trap you in suffering and delay your spiritual progress. Here's where it gets intensely practical. Every single day you're thinking thousands of thoughts. Most of them are repetitive, unconscious, and directly opposed to the life your soul intended to live. You say you want abundance, but you think thoughts of scarcity. You say you want love, but you think thoughts of unworthiness. You say you want peace, but you think thoughts of conflict and anxiety. Cayce would say you're giving the universe mixed signals, and the universe can only respond to what you're actually transmitting, not what you're claiming to want. The work, then, is to become conscious. To watch your thoughts the way you'd watch your words if you knew someone was recording everything you said. Because someone is recording. The universe is recording, and it's going to play back everything you've transmitted in the form of your life circumstances. Are you comfortable with what you've been broadcasting? Cayce gave specific guidance on how to work with this law. First, become aware of your habitual thought patterns. What do you think about most? What stories do you tell yourself about who you are, what you deserve, what's possible for you? These stories are creating your reality. If you don't like your reality, you must change your stories. Second, deliberately choose thoughts that align with the reality you want to experience. This isn't fantasy or denial. It's consciously using your creative power instead of using it unconsciously. If you want health, think thoughts of vitality and wholeness. If you want loving relationships, think thoughts of love and worthiness. If you want spiritual growth, think thoughts that reflect your soul's divine nature. But here's the challenging part. You must think these new thoughts consistently, persistently, even when your current circumstances contradict them. This is where most people fail. They try thinking positively for a few days, see no immediate change, and return to their habitual negative patterns. Cayce explained that thought forms need time to build enough energy to manifest physically. The denser the material plane, the longer the process takes. But the process is happening whether you see it or not. Every thought is working, creating, attracting, and you must think these thoughts with feeling. Cayce revealed that emotion is the accelerant of manifestation. A thought without emotion is weak. A thought charged with deep feeling becomes a powerful creative force. This is why worry is so dangerous. It combines sustained thought with intense emotion, creating exactly what you fear. This is also why prayer works when it's done with faith and feeling. You're not trying to convince God of anything. You're aligning your creative consciousness with divine will, and that alignment creates miracles. Let's talk about the darker side of this teaching. Cayce warned about the danger of negative thinking, especially toward others. When you think harmful, judgmental, or hateful thoughts about someone, you're not just having a private opinion. You're sending actual force toward that person, and that force affects them. More importantly, it affects you. The law of karma ensures that whatever you send out returns to you. Think thoughts of harm, and harm will find you. Think thoughts of blessing, and blessings will find you. This isn't mystical speculation. Cayce described this as spiritual law as reliable as gravity. Many people go through life wondering why certain patterns keep repeating. Why do they keep attracting the same kind of difficult partner? Why do financial problems keep arising, no matter how hard they work? Why does their health keep breaking down? Cayce would ask. What are you thinking? Because whatever pattern is repeating in your life is a pattern that exists first in your mind. You keep creating it through repeated thought. The universe assumes you want more of what you're focusing on, so it gives you more. This is where the teaching becomes a mirror. Your life is showing you your mind. Everything you're experiencing right now, the good, the bad, the frustrating, the joyful, is a reflection of your habitual thought patterns. If you're honest with yourself, you can trace every circumstance back to a thought or belief you've been holding. This isn't about blaming yourself or feeling guilty. It's about taking responsibility for your creative power so you can use it consciously instead of unconsciously. Cayce also taught that thoughts create not just external circumstances, but internal states. The quality of your consciousness is determined by the quality of your thoughts. Think peaceful thoughts, and you become peaceful. Think anxious thoughts, and you become anxious. This seems obvious, but most people never connect their internal experience to their thought choices. They think anxiety just happens to them, never realizing they're actively generating it through catastrophic thinking. The spiritual dimension of this teaching is where it becomes truly transformative. Cayce explained that as you evolve spiritually, your thoughts gain creative power more quickly. A spiritually advanced person's thoughts manifest faster than an unconscious person's thoughts. This is why spiritual development requires such vigilance over the mind. The more conscious you become, the more responsibility you have to think carefully, lovingly, and in alignment with divine will. If you've been on a spiritual path and feel like things have gotten harder, this might be why. Your thoughts are manifesting more quickly, which means your unconscious negative patterns are showing up faster so you can see them and heal them. It's not that your path is wrong, it's that your creative power is increasing and the universe is showing you everything in your mind that needs to be transformed. Now let's address the question many people have. What about thoughts that feel involuntary? The intrusive, unwanted thoughts that just appear? Cayce would say these are usually echoes of past thought patterns or karmic residue from previous lifetimes. But here's what matters. You're not responsible for the thought appearing, but you are responsible for what you do with it. Do you engage it, feed it, give it energy? Or do you observe it, release it, and redirect your attention to higher thoughts? This is the spiritual practice, not achieving a mind empty of negative thoughts, but developing the discipline to not empower them. The Christ consciousness that Cayce spoke of so often represents the perfect use of creative thought. Jesus, Cayce explained, was a soul who had completely mastered the law of thought. He knew that his word, his thought spoken with authority, would manifest instantly. "Be healed," he said, and healing occurred. "Peace, be still," he commanded, and the storm ceased. He demonstrated what humans are capable of when thought is completely aligned with divine will and charged with unwavering faith. You have that same potential. You're created in the image of God, which means you have the same creative faculty. The difference between where you are and where Christ demonstrated is not a difference in kind, but in degree of mastery and purity of alignment. Your thoughts can heal. Your thoughts can transform. Your thoughts can create miracles. But only when they're aligned with love, truth, and your soul's highest purpose. Consider this. If you truly believed that your thoughts were creating your reality, would you think differently? If you knew with absolute certainty that the thought you're having right now about your health, your finances, your relationships, your future, if you knew that thought was a seed being planted that would grow into your lived experience, would you think that thought? Or would you choose a different one? Most people live as if their thoughts don't matter, as if thinking is just passive. Commentary on life. Cayce revealed that this is the fundamental illusion keeping humanity trapped in suffering. Your thoughts are never passive. They're always active, always creative, always building something. The only question is, what are you building? Here's the daily practice Cayce would recommend. Morning and evening, examine your thoughts. In the morning, set your mental intention for the day. Decide what you want to create, what qualities you want to embody, how you want to serve. Throughout the day, catch yourself when you drift into habitual negative patterns. Don't judge yourself. Just notice and redirect. In the evening, review your thought patterns for the day. What did you create mentally? Are you satisfied with those creations? What will you choose tomorrow? This practice sounds simple, but it's perhaps the most challenging spiritual work there is, because the mind is habitual and habits run deep. You'll find yourself thinking the same negative thoughts 1,000 times, even after you've committed to change. But each time you catch yourself and choose differently, you're weakening the old pattern and strengthening the new one. Over time, and Cayce emphasized this takes time, the new pattern becomes the habit. The question you must ask yourself is this: am I willing to take responsibility for my creative power? Because once you understand that thoughts create reality, you can never again blame your circumstances on anything outside yourself. You can never again claim to be a victim of fate, other people, or bad luck. You must face the sobering truth that you've been creating all along, and if you don't like what you've created, you must change what you're thinking. But here's the beautiful side of this responsibility. You're free, completely free. No circumstance, no matter how difficult, has power over you once you realize you can change it through changing your thought. No pattern, no matter how entrenched, is permanent once you withdraw your mental energy from it and invest that energy elsewhere. You're the artist, and your life is the canvas, and you can paint whatever you choose. Cayce's final warning was this: you will be held accountable for your thoughts, not by some external judge, but by the law itself. Your thoughts create your reality, and your reality reflects your thoughts. You can't escape this law. You can only work with it consciously or suffer from it unconsciously. What will you choose? Before we close, take a moment to truly sit with this. Right now, in this very moment, what are you thinking? Not what you wish you were thinking or what you think you should be thinking. What are you actually thinking? Because that thought, and thousands like it, that you'll think today, tomorrow, next week, are building the reality you'll experience. They're constructing your future circumstances. They're setting your karmic trajectory. They're determining whether your soul evolves or stagnates in this lifetime. If you found this exploration of Cayce's teachings on thought valuable, honor your own spiritual journey by subscribing to this channel and sharing this video with someone who needs to understand their creative power. These teachings aren't entertainment. They're tools for transformation. The universe is listening to your thoughts right now. What are you telling it to create? Consciousness isn't something you have. It's what you are. And Edgar Cayce's trance revelations expose a truth that demolishes everything modern science tells you about the nature of reality itself. In his psychic readings, Cayce described consciousness not as a byproduct of your brain's electrical activity, but as the fundamental creative force of the universe, the very substance from which all matter, energy, and experience emerge. He revealed that your thoughts aren't just chemical reactions happening inside your skull. They're living entities with form, vibration, and power, capable of building worlds or destroying them. This means every thought you've ever had still exists somewhere, shaping dimensions you can't see but inhabit every moment of your life. While neuroscientists debate whether consciousness arises from neural networks, Cayce's readings from the 1920s and 40s declared something far more radical. Consciousness is the primordial substance of God himself, and you're wielding it right now, in this very instant, creating your reality whether you realize it or not. The question isn't whether consciousness is real, it's whether you're prepared to accept that you're responsible for everything your consciousness has built. What have you been creating with yours? There's a moment in Edgar Cayce's readings where someone asked him the most fundamental question any human can ask: what is consciousness made of? His answer, delivered in deep trance state, shattered every materialist assumption about reality. He said consciousness is spirit made manifest, the actual building block of existence itself, not neurons firing, not chemical reactions, but the creative essence of divinity taking form through focused thought and will. Think about what that really means. Every scientist searching for consciousness in brain tissue, every philosopher debating whether mind emerges from matter, they're all looking in the wrong direction. Cayce revealed they're asking the wrong question entirely. Cayce explained it this way: consciousness is to God what a wave is to the ocean. The wave appears separate, moves independently, crashes on shores and creates effects, but it's never actually separate from the ocean itself. It's just the ocean expressing itself in a particular form and pattern. Your consciousness, your individual awareness, is God experiencing himself through the specific vibrational pattern that is you. You're not having spiritual experiences. You are spirit experiencing physicality through the lens of focused consciousness. But here's where it gets extraordinary. In his readings, Cayce described consciousness as having substance density and creative power. He said your thoughts are things, literal constructions made of conscious energy that exist in dimensions beyond the physical. When you think a thought, you're not just experiencing neural activity, you're building an actual form in the mental plane, a thought form with its own vibration and magnetic properties. These thought forms attract similar vibrations, repel others, and literally shape the circumstances that manifest in your physical experience. This isn't mysticism or metaphor. According to Cayce, this is the precise mechanics of how reality operates at its most fundamental level. Modern quantum physics stumbles toward this same conclusion from a different direction. Physicists have discovered that observation affects outcomes at the quantum level, that consciousness seems to collapse probability waves into definite states, that the universe behaves differently when it's being watched. They call this the observer effect, and admit they have no idea how or why it works. Cayce explained it 70 years before quantum mechanics formalized these observations. Consciousness doesn't just observe reality, it constructs reality from the infinite field of possibility that mystics call the void and scientists call the quantum field. Here's what Cayce revealed about the composition of consciousness. He said it operates on 3 levels simultaneously: the physical, the mental, and the spiritual. The physical consciousness is your ordinary waking awareness, limited to sensory input and bound by time and space. This is the consciousness most people identify with exclusively. They think they are their physical consciousness and nothing more. The mental consciousness is vaster, encompassing your subconscious mind where memories, habits, and the accumulated experiences of your soul across multiple lifetimes are stored. But even this isn't the deepest level. The spiritual consciousness is your connection to the universal consciousness, what Cayce called the Christ consciousness, the awareness that knows itself as inseparable from God, from all creation, from every soul that has ever existed or will exist. Cayce taught that these 3 levels aren't really separate at all. They're different frequencies of the same consciousness, like radio stations broadcasting on different wavelengths. Your physical consciousness is tuned to the density and limitation of matter. Your mental consciousness operates at a higher, faster frequency. Your spiritual consciousness vibrates at the highest rate of all, in perfect harmony with the divine mind. The tragedy of most human lives is that people remain locked on the physical channel their entire existence, never realizing they could tune into vastly expanded stations of awareness, broadcasting infinitely richer programming. In his readings, Cayce explained that consciousness is literally what matter is made of. Physics tells you that solid objects are mostly empty space, that atoms are almost entirely void with tiny particles of energy swirling in vast emptiness. But what is that energy? What are those particles really made of? Cayce said they're made of slowed-down consciousness, of spirit that has lowered its vibration so much it appears as solid matter. The entire physical universe is frozen thought, divine consciousness, that has crystallized into the appearance of separation and solidity. Your body isn't housing your consciousness. Your body is consciousness expressing itself in dense, slow, vibrating form. This revelation has staggering implications for how you understand yourself. If your physical body is consciousness in material form, and your thoughts are conscious creations in mental form, then you're constantly creating at multiple levels simultaneously. Every thought doesn't just float through your mind and disappear. It becomes a structure in the mental dimension. Every repeated thought strengthens that structure until it becomes solid enough to attract corresponding physical circumstances. Every belief you hold is a concentrated pattern of conscious energy drawing matching experiences toward you, like a magnet pulling iron filings. You're not experiencing a pre-existing reality. You're generating your reality moment by moment through the creative power of consciousness itself. Cayce warned that most people use this incredible power unconsciously, randomly, destructively. They think fear-based thoughts without realizing they're building fear into their mental atmosphere, which then manifests as fearful situations in their physical lives. They replay resentment and anger without understanding they're constructing prisons of negative emotion that trap their consciousness in patterns of suffering. They focus on limitation and lack, never recognizing that their attention on scarcity is the very mechanism that perpetuates scarcity in their experience. The law isn't moral, it's mechanical. Consciousness creates according to where it's directed, regardless of whether that direction serves your highest good. But there's something else Cayce revealed about consciousness that changes everything. It's immortal. Your physical body dies, dissolving back into the elements from which it emerged. Your mental constructions, your accumulated thought forms, they persist in other dimensions, but eventually dissipate too. But consciousness itself, the essential awareness that you are, this never ceases to exist. It can't cease to exist because it's made of the same substance as God, and God is eternal, unchanging, immortal being. The you that existed before your physical birth, and will continue after your physical death, isn't some nebulous soul floating in heaven. It's pure consciousness, aware, creative, evolving through an infinite series of experiences across time and dimension. Cayce's readings describe consciousness as having innate qualities: awareness, creativity, and will. Awareness means consciousness knows itself. It's self-reflective, capable of observing its own operations. Creativity means consciousness can generate new forms, new patterns, new experiences from the infinite potential within itself. Will means consciousness can direct its own focus, choose what to attend to, decide what to build with its creative power. These three qualities, awareness, creativity, and will, these are what make you a god in potential, a spark of the divine capable of the same creative acts as the Creator, though on a smaller, more limited scale while in physical form. This is why Cayce placed such enormous emphasis on the directive use of consciousness through meditation, prayer, and intentional thought. He wasn't talking about positive thinking as a feel-good philosophy. He was describing the precise technology of consciousness, how to tune your awareness to higher frequencies, how to purify your mental constructions so they align with divine will, how to exercise your creative power deliberately rather than unconsciously. When you meditate, you're not escaping reality. You're stepping back from the physical frequency to access the mental and spiritual frequencies where you can perceive the thought forms you've built and consciously rebuild them according to spiritual ideals. In multiple readings, Cayce insisted that thoughts are alive. They have life force flowing through them. When you give sustained attention to a thought, you're feeding it energy. making it stronger, more magnetic, more capable of manifesting in physical form. This is why he counseled people to guard their minds more carefully than they guard their physical possessions. A thief might steal your money, but that's just a temporary material loss. Toxic thoughts steal your consciousness itself, redirecting your creative power toward building hellish, inner and outer experiences that can persist for lifetimes if left uncorrected. Your thoughts aren't just describing your reality, they're prescribing it, writing the script that your experience will follow. Cayce also revealed that consciousness is communal, not just individual. At the deepest level, there's only one consciousness, the universal mind, experiencing itself through countless individual focal points. This means at the spiritual frequency, you're already connected to every other consciousness that exists. Your thoughts aren't entirely private. They ripple through the collective mental atmosphere, adding to the overall vibration of humanity's consciousness. When you think thoughts of fear, you strengthen fear in the collective field. When you think thoughts of love and compassion, you elevate the entire species. You're never just affecting yourself. You're always contributing to the collective consciousness of humanity, either raising it or lowering it with every mental act. This interconnectedness explains phenomena that materialist science can't. How mothers know when their children are in danger across vast distances, how identical twins report identical experiences while separated, how ideas seem to emerge simultaneously in multiple minds that have no physical connection. Cayce said consciousness operates outside the constraints of space and time. At the spiritual level, all minds interpenetrate, all awareness is shared, all knowledge is accessible because there's only one infinite mind experiencing itself through infinite perspectives. When you access intuition or receive inspiration, you're not creating something new. You're tuning into information that already exists in the universal consciousness and always has. The readings go even further into the nature of what consciousness is made of. Cayce said, consciousness is composed of the same substance as light itself. Not physical light that your eyes detect, but spiritual light that he sometimes called the Christ light or the divine radiance. This primordial light is the first emanation from God, the initial act of creation where undifferentiated being begins to differentiate into creator and created, observer and observed, consciousness and object of consciousness. Every individualized consciousness is a ray of this original light, maintaining perfect connection to its source while appearing to be separate as it explores the infinite possibilities of existence. He explained that this spiritual light carries information the way physical light carries images. When spiritual light passes through the lens of an individual consciousness, it refracts into the specific patterns that create that soul's unique perspective, personality, and purpose. Your consciousness isn't random. It has a specific frequency, a signature vibration that distinguishes you from every other consciousness while remaining fundamentally one with all consciousness. This unique refraction is what gives you free will, the ability to focus your awareness in directions that may align with divine will or diverge from it, creating experiences of harmony or discord depending on the choices you make with your conscious attention. Now here's the part that should make you deeply uncomfortable. If consciousness is what you are, and consciousness creates according to where it's directed, then you are entirely responsible for the state of your consciousness right now. Not your parents, not your circumstances, not society, not God, you. Every habit of thought you've cultivated, every belief system you've adopted, every emotional pattern you've allowed to become automatic, these are all choices you've made with your consciousness, either actively or through passive neglect. And these choices have built the entire architecture of your current experience. Your relationships, your health, your finances, your sense of meaning, all of these are outpicturings of the state of your consciousness, materializations of the thought forms you've been constructing consciously or unconsciously. If you don't like what your life looks like right now, Cayce would tell you to stop looking for external solutions and start examining your consciousness itself. What thoughts do you think repetitively? What beliefs do you hold without question? What emotions do you indulge versus which ones do you transmute? These aren't abstract psychological questions. They're inquiries into the actual creative mechanisms you're using to build your reality. Change your consciousness, And your reality must change because reality is nothing but consciousness taking form. This isn't a promise or a wish. It's mechanical law, as reliable as gravity and as unavoidable as consequence. The readings make clear that raising your consciousness isn't optional if you're serious about spiritual development. It's the entire path. You don't become more spiritual by believing the right doctrines or performing the correct rituals. You become more spiritual by literally raising the vibrational frequency of your consciousness through consistent application of spiritual principles, thinking thoughts that align with divine love, feeling emotions that harmonize with creative joy, directing your will towards service rather than selfishness. Each time you do this, you tune your consciousness to a slightly higher station, gaining access to perceptions and powers that were previously beyond your frequency range. Cayce warned that consciousness development isn't linear or easy. Your consciousness encounters resistance when you try to raise it because you've built structures of thought and emotion over many lifetimes that operate at lower frequencies. These old patterns have momentum, inertia, a kind of gravitational pull that tries to keep your awareness locked in familiar territories, even when those territories cause suffering. Breaking free requires sustained effort, daily discipline, and willingness to experience the discomfort of dissolving thought forms you've identified with. For so long, they feel like you. But they're not you. They're just structures your consciousness built, and can therefore unbuild and rebuild at higher levels. Here's what makes all of this urgent, rather than just interesting philosophy. Cayce said the Earth is entering a period of accelerated consciousness shift. The collective vibration is rising, which means individual consciousnesses that remain at lower, denser frequencies will experience increasing dissonance, friction, and chaos in their lives. It's not punishment, it's physics. When the collective frequency rises and you don't rise with it, you experience the gap between your vibration and the new baseline as turbulence, crisis, breakdown. The solution isn't to resist the shift, but to actively participate in it by doing the inner work of raising your own consciousness deliberately and consistently. So let me ask you directly, what is the actual state of your consciousness right now, in this moment? Not what you wish it was or think it should be, but what it actually is. What thoughts dominate your mental space? What emotions color your daily experience? What beliefs shape your perception of what's possible for your life? Are you using your consciousness as a precision instrument of creative power? Or are you letting it run on automatic, churning out the same old patterns that produce the same old results? Because consciousness is what you're made of. It's the only tool you have. And how you use it right now is determining not just your future experiences, but your soul's trajectory across eternities. Cayce didn't offer comfort to the spiritually lazy. He offered truth to the spiritually serious. And the truth he revealed about consciousness is both liberating and terrifying. You are far more powerful than you've been taught, far more responsible than you want to be, and far more eternal than you can comprehend. Your consciousness is literally made of divine substance, operates according to divine laws, and is destined for divine reunion. But that destiny requires you to wake up to what you are and start wielding your consciousness with the reverence, discipline, and intention it deserves. Everything depends on this. Your happiness, your relationships, your health, your spiritual progress, all of it flows from the state of your consciousness. The real question isn't what is consciousness made of. Edgar Cayce answered that. It's made of God expressing as you, creating your reality through the direction of your attention and the quality of your thoughts. The real question is, now that you know what consciousness is and how it works, what are you going to do with yours? Because every moment you're either raising it or lowering it, purifying it or polluting it, using it consciously or wasting it unconsciously. There's no neutral ground. Your consciousness is always in motion, always creating, always building the next moment of your experience. So before this day ends, before you go to sleep tonight and your consciousness shifts into different dimensions, ask yourself honestly, am I using my consciousness the way a soul on a divine mission should? Am I building thought forms that reflect the Christ consciousness Cayce said is my true nature? Or am I squandering the most precious gift the Creator gave me, the power to create with consciousness itself? If this video has challenged you to examine your own consciousness more seriously, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. We're exploring the depths of Edgar Cayce's spiritual teachings that most channels won't touch because they require too much self-honesty and inner work. Drop a comment sharing your biggest realization about consciousness from this video. What thought forms do you need to dissolve? What frequency do you need to raise to? Let's have a real conversation about consciousness development, not surface-level spirituality. The path Cayce revealed isn't easy, but it's the only path that leads to true awakening. And your consciousness, eternal, creative, divine, is waiting for you to use it the way it was meant to be used. Your deceased loved ones are screaming at you right now and you can't hear them, not because they're silent, but because you've been conditioned to dismiss every single attempt they make to reach you as coincidence, imagination, or wishful thinking. Edgar Cayce spent decades in deep trance states accessing universal consciousness, and what he discovered about communication between the living and the dead will shatter everything you thought you knew about death's finality. In his readings, Cayce revealed that the deceased don't just watch over you passively. They actively intervene, guide, warn, and comfort you through specific identifiable signs that most people encounter weekly, but recognize never. The veil between worlds is thinner than tissue paper, and your departed family members, friends, and guides are constantly pushing through it, desperately trying to make you understand that death changed nothing about their love for you or their investment in your spiritual journey. What if I told you that conversation you've been trying to have with your grandmother, father, or best friend isn't one-sided? What if they've been answering you all along and you just haven't learned their new language? Drop a comment below sharing whether you've experienced any unexplained moments that might have been contact from someone you've lost. Before we dive into the 5 unmistakable signs Cayce identified, you need to understand something that will change your entire relationship with death. In his psychic readings, Edgar Cayce was asked thousands of times about the afterlife, about whether the dead could communicate with the living, about whether consciousness survived bodily death. And his answer, delivered consistently across decades of trance sessions, was unequivocal. Death is not an ending. It's not even a significant interruption. It's a transition as natural as walking from one room into another, and the people you love who've made that transition haven't gone anywhere. They've simply changed their vibrational frequency, shifted their dimensional location, but their awareness of you, their love for you, their concern for your well-being remains absolutely intact. Cayce explained that when someone dies, their consciousness immediately becomes aware of their continued existence. There's no long sleep, no waiting period, no cosmic judgment hall where they're sequestered away from earthly concerns. Within moments of physical death, the soul recognizes itself as eternal, reviews its recent life experience, and begins the process of understanding its new state of being. And here's what shocked even the people who requested these readings. One of the first impulses of the newly deceased is to reach back toward their loved ones still in physical form, to communicate that they're fine, that death wasn't what anyone thought it was, that the separation everyone grieves is largely illusory. But there's a problem. The living and the dead now operate on different frequencies. Think of it like radio stations. Your deceased loved one is broadcasting on FM, but you're only tuned to AM. They're speaking clearly, but you literally cannot hear them unless you adjust your receiver, and most people never do. Most people are so locked into material consciousness, so convinced by scientific materialism, that death equals annihilation, so terrified of being thought crazy or delusional that they've essentially soundproofed themselves against the very communications they claim to desperately want. Cayce's readings reveal that the deceased are fully aware of this communication barrier. They know you can't hear them the way you used to, so they get creative. They learn to work within the limitations of physical reality, to manipulate energy and matter in subtle ways, to plant thoughts and create synchronicities and manifest their presence through whatever channels remain open. And they develop a language of signs, a vocabulary of contact that transcends the normal sensory channels you rely on. These aren't random occurrences. These aren't grief-induced hallucinations or the brain playing tricks on itself. According to Cayce's extensive readings on the subject, these are deliberate, intentional communications from conscious beings who love you and refuse to let something as trivial as death sever your connection. Let me walk you through the 5 primary ways Cayce said the deceased reach out. And as I describe each one, I want you to honestly ask yourself how many of these you've experienced but dismissed. The first and most powerful sign is vivid dreams, where your deceased loved one appears with unusual clarity and presence. Now I need you to understand something crucial here. Cayce made a sharp distinction between ordinary dreams about the deceased and actual visitations that occur during the dream state. In regular dreams, your subconscious mind processes grief, memory, unresolved emotions. The deceased person appears, but they're essentially a projection of your own psyche, a symbol your mind uses to work through loss. But in true visitations, something entirely different happens. In his readings, Cayce explained that during sleep your consciousness partially separates from your physical body. Your awareness shifts to what he called the borderland between physical and spiritual dimensions. And it's in this borderland state that actual communication between the living and deceased becomes possible. Your loved one, existing now in a spiritual dimension, can meet you in this intermediate space. And when they do, the dream has qualities that distinguish it completely from normal dreaming. People who've experienced these visitations report that the deceased appears more real, more solid, more present than they do in regular dreams. The colors are more vivid. The emotional intensity is overwhelming but not distressing. There's often a sense of profound peace, of rightness, of communion that transcends anything normal dreaming produces. And here's the key identifier Cayce pointed to. When you wake up, you know with absolute certainty that what happened wasn't just a dream. There's a quality of reality to the experience that regular dreams never possess. You don't wake up wondering if it was real. You wake up knowing it was real, even if everyone around you dismisses it as grief or imagination. In these dream visitations, the deceased often communicates specific information. Sometimes it's reassurance that they're at peace, that their suffering has ended, that they've transitioned successfully. Sometimes it's guidance about decisions you're facing, warnings about paths you shouldn't take, encouragement about directions you should pursue. Sometimes it's simply presence, a wordless communication of ongoing love and connection that requires no explanation. Cayce's readings are filled with examples of people reporting these experiences and asking whether they were genuine contact. And almost invariably, he confirmed that yes, their loved one had indeed reached out, had indeed met them in that borderland state, had indeed communicated what the person remembered. But here's what most people don't realize. These visitations require something from you. They require receptivity. If you're completely closed to the possibility, if your skepticism acts as a barrier, if your grief is so consuming that you're vibrationally locked into suffering, the deceased person may try repeatedly to reach you in dreams, but never quite break through. Cayce emphasized that the living have far more control over this communication than they realize. Your beliefs, your openness, your spiritual state directly impact whether these dream visitations can occur. Think about the dreams you've had since losing someone important. Have there been dreams that felt different? Dreams where they appeared with unusual clarity, where the emotional impact lingered for days, where you woke up with information or peace you didn't have before? Or have you been so convinced these would just be your mind playing tricks that you've essentially forbidden the actual experience from occurring? The second sign Cayce identified is sudden thoughts that arise in your mind with a quality that feels distinctly not your own. This is more subtle than dreams, but potentially more frequent. In his readings, Cayce explained that thought is the primary currency of spiritual dimensions. The deceased don't have physical bodies or vocal cords anymore, but they absolutely still think, and their thoughts can impress themselves upon your consciousness if you're receptive. This manifests as ideas, memories, or impulses that seem to arrive fully formed in your awareness, without any preceding chain of thought that led to them. You're going about your day, your mind occupied with mundane concerns, and suddenly there's a thought about your deceased loved one, a memory you hadn't recalled in years, or more strikingly, a thought that sounds like advice they would give, phrased in language they would use, addressing a situation they couldn't possibly know about because it developed after their death. Cayce was very specific about how to distinguish these impressed thoughts from your own mental activity. He said that thoughts originating from your own mind have a genealogy. You can trace them backward to what triggered them, what association led to what memory. But thoughts impressed upon you from a spiritual source arrive without precedent. They interrupt your existing thought stream rather than flowing from it, and they often carry emotional content or perspective that doesn't match your current state. For example, you might be consumed with anxiety about a decision, spiraling into worst-case scenarios, and suddenly there's a thought that feels like calm reassurance, a reminder of some principle or perspective your deceased parent always held, delivered with a certainty and peace that your anxious mind wasn't generating. Or you're struggling with a relationship conflict, and abruptly there's an insight about the other person's perspective, a compassionate reframing that sounds exactly like something your deceased spouse would say. Most people experience this weekly and dismiss it instantly as memory, as imagination, as their subconscious dredging up past conversations. And sometimes that's exactly what it is. But Cayce's readings reveal that the deceased actively participate in your thought life, that they know what you're dealing with, that they can and do offer guidance by impressing thoughts upon your consciousness. The question is whether you're paying attention to the quality and source of your own mental activity, or whether you're so identified with every thought as being yours that you miss the ones that aren't. Here's what makes this particularly profound. According to Cayce, the deceased maintain active interest in your spiritual development. Death doesn't make them suddenly indifferent to whether you're fulfilling your soul's purpose, making choices aligned with your higher good, learning the lessons you incarnated to learn. If anything, their perspective becomes clearer. They can see patterns you can't see, recognize spiritual implications you're blind to, understand the long-term trajectory of your choices in ways your limited physical perspective prevents. And they try to help by planting thoughts, by impressing guidance, by steering your awareness toward truth. But you have to create space for this. If your mind is constantly filled with noise, with anxiety, with endless mental chatter and distraction, there's no silence in which these impressed thoughts can be heard. Cayce emphasized meditation, quiet reflection, moments of receptive stillness as essential practices for anyone wanting clearer communication with spiritual dimensions, including with their deceased loved ones. When was the last time you had a thought that seemed to arrive from nowhere, that carried wisdom you weren't sure you possessed, that sounded like advice from someone you've lost? Did you dismiss it immediately, or did you consider that maybe, just maybe, it was exactly what it seemed to be? The third sign is the unmistakable physical sensation of presence, the feeling that someone is in the room with you when physical eyes see nothing. Cayce's readings explain that the deceased exist in a dimension that interpenetrates physical reality. They're not far away in some distant heaven. They're right here, occupying the same space you do, but vibrating at a frequency your physical senses can't normally detect. Think of it like ultraviolet light. It's present, it's real, it's affecting everything around you, but your eyes can't see it without special equipment. However, you have senses beyond your 5 physical ones. You have spiritual perception, energetic awareness, what Cayce called the 6th sense or spiritual sensitivity that every human being possesses, but most have let atrophy through disuse and skepticism. And occasionally, when a deceased loved one draws very close, when their energy field intersects with yours in a particular way, that spiritual sense activates and you feel them. People describe this in remarkably consistent ways across cultures and belief systems. A sudden sense that you're not alone. A feeling of being watched but not in a threatening way, in a loving, protective way. Changes in temperature, usually a slight warmth or occasionally a cool spot that seems to have no physical source. A tingling sensation, often at the back of the neck or along the arms. Sometimes it's even more pronounced, a feeling of being touched, of a hand on your shoulder, an embrace you can feel but not see. In his readings, Cayce confirmed that these sensations are often exactly what they seem to be. The deceased person has moved their energy very close to yours, has essentially overlapped their spiritual body with your physical location, and your spiritual senses are detecting that overlap. This isn't imagination, it's not grief making you feel things that aren't there. It's your non-physical perceptive abilities functioning exactly as they were designed to, alerting you to a presence your physical eyes can't register. But here's what's crucial to understand. These moments of felt presence often occur during times of emotional intensity for you. Moments of grief, yes, but also moments of joy they want to share. Moments of transition where you need support. Moments of danger where they're trying to warn or protect you. Cayce's readings reveal that the deceased have limited ability to affect physical matter directly, but they can absolutely make their presence known energetically, and they do so strategically at times when their support or guidance is most needed. Think about the times you've felt this. Maybe you were sitting in their favorite chair, overwhelmed with missing them, and suddenly the quality of the air changed. The loneliness lifted slightly, and for just a moment you could have sworn they were right there with you. Maybe you were facing a crisis, terrified and alone, and you felt an inexplicable sense of being protected, of invisible support surrounding you. Maybe you were experiencing something they would have loved, a grandchild's achievement, a long-sought success, and you felt them there celebrating with you, even though they're supposedly gone. Most people have these experiences and immediately rationalize them away. It was just the heating system causing a temperature change. It was just emotion making you feel things. It was just loneliness creating comforting illusions. And Cayce would say that this reflexive dismissal, this immediate leap to material explanations, is precisely what keeps you cut off from a dimension of reality that's trying desperately to make itself known to you. What if you stop dismissing? What if the next time you feel an inexplicable presence, instead of explaining it away, you simply acknowledged it? What if you spoke out loud, thanked them for being there, told them you recognize their presence? Cayce's readings suggest that this kind of acknowledgement strengthens the connection, makes future contact easier, encourages the deceased to continue their efforts to reach you. The fourth sign is meaningful synchronicities and symbolic occurrences that seem too perfectly timed to be coincidental. This is where Cayce's teachings get particularly interesting, because he simultaneously confirmed that the deceased can and do create synchronicities, while warning strongly against superstition and seeing signs in everything. There's a balance here that requires discernment. In his readings, Cayce explained that the deceased can influence material reality in small ways. They can't move mountains or perform obvious miracles, but they can nudge probabilities, create circumstances, arrange coincidences. A song that was special to you and your deceased loved one plays on the radio at the exact moment you're thinking about them. You find an object you associate with them in an unexpected place. An animal they loved appears repeatedly in unusual ways. You encounter their name or birthday or significant dates in improbable sequences. Cayce said these synchronicities serve multiple purposes. Sometimes they're simply the deceased person's way of saying, "I'm here, I'm aware of you, you're not alone." Sometimes they're attempts to communicate specific guidance or direction, using symbols and signs as a language, when direct thought impression isn't getting through. Sometimes they're meant to comfort you during grief, to remind you of happy memories, to shift your emotional state from despair to connection. And this is where Cayce was very firm. You cannot turn this into a superstitious system, where every bird, every number, every random occurrence is interpreted as a cosmic message. That path leads to magical thinking that disconnects you from reality rather than deepening your spiritual perception. The key is in the quality of the synchronicity. Does it carry genuine emotional resonance? Does it occur at a moment of particular significance? Does it communicate something specific, or is it just vague and generic? Does it feel like contact, or does it feel like you're desperately grasping for any sign that someone still cares? Cayce emphasized that real synchronicities created by the deceased have a distinctive quality. They're precisely timed to moments of need or meaning in your life. They often involve something specific to your relationship with that person, something too particular to be explained by general coincidence, and they produce a felt sense of recognition, a deep knowing that this wasn't random, that this was intentional communication. I want you to think carefully about this. Have there been moments since your loved one's death when something happened that seemed impossibly well-timed? Their favorite song playing when you were drowning in grief and desperately needed comfort? A butterfly or bird behaving in unusual ways at a significant moment? Finding something of theirs you thought was lost, appearing exactly when you needed the reminder of their presence? Have you dismissed these as coincidence, or have you allowed yourself to consider that maybe the universe, isn't quite as random as you've been taught? Here's what Cayce's readings reveal about why the deceased bother with these subtle signs rather than just appearing in obvious, undeniable ways. It comes down to spiritual law and free will. The veil between dimensions exists for important reasons. It allows souls in physical incarnation to focus on their earthly lessons without constant interference from spiritual dimensions. It maintains the conditions necessary for genuine spiritual growth, which requires uncertainty, faith, and independent choice. If the deceased could appear as clearly as living people, it would violate these conditions, would make physical life less meaningful as a spiritual training ground. So they work within the rules. They communicate through dreams, through thoughts, through presence, through synchronicity, through all the channels that remain open while respecting the boundary that keeps the dimensions appropriately separate. And they trust that those who genuinely seek connection, who remain spiritually open, who pay attention to subtle reality will receive their messages, while those who need to remain focused entirely on material existence won't be disturbed by communications they're not ready to receive. If you're watching this video, you're in the first category. You're someone seeking to understand, to connect, to remain open to dimensions of reality that consensus culture tells you don't exist. And that openness is exactly what your deceased loved ones need from you to continue their contact. The fifth and final sign Cayce identified is influence on your decisions and life path, especially regarding important choices and moments of protection from danger. This is perhaps the most profound and least recognized form of contact because it doesn't feel like communication at all. It feels like intuition, like gut instinct, like lucky coincidence. But Cayce's readings reveal that the deceased actively participate in guiding your life trajectory when you allow them to. In his trance states, Cayce described how souls who have transitioned to spiritual dimensions can see patterns and consequences that are invisible to those still in physical form. They can perceive the spiritual implications of your choices, understand karmic dynamics at play, recognize opportunities and dangers you can't see. And because they love you, because they remain invested in your spiritual success, they try to steer you toward choices that serve your highest good and away from paths that would harm you. This manifests as sudden impulses to do or not do something. You're about to make a decision, and there's an inexplicable hesitation, a voice in your head that sounds suspiciously like your deceased father warning you to reconsider. You're facing multiple options, and one of them keeps drawing your attention even though logically another seems better. And later you discover that the one you were drawn to led to crucial opportunities while the logical choice would have been disastrous. You're in potential danger, and you're suddenly compelled to change your route, leave early, stay home, and you later learn you avoided an accident or harmful situation. Cayce was asked repeatedly in readings whether deceased loved ones could protect the living, could intervene in physical circumstances, could prevent harm, and his answer was nuanced. They can't violate your free will or override the karmic lessons you're meant to learn, but within those boundaries, yes, they absolutely try to protect and guide you. They impress thoughts of caution. They create circumstances that redirect you. They work through your intuition and instinct to steer you away from harm and toward growth. But here's the tragedy Cayce pointed to in his readings. Most people have completely disconnected from their intuition. They've been trained to trust only logical analysis, material evidence, rational calculation. So when that gut feeling arises, when that voice of caution or encouragement speaks, when that inexplicable pull toward or away from something activates, they dismiss it immediately as irrational, as fear, as wishful thinking. And in doing so, they ignore the very guidance they've been praying for, delivered through the only channel available to those who love them from beyond physical death. Think about the times you've had a strong intuition about something and ignored it, only to later wish you'd listened. Think about the times you've made a choice that felt right, even though you couldn't logically explain why, and it turned out better than you could have anticipated. Think about the moments when you felt inexplicably warned away from danger or compelled toward an opportunity. How many of those experiences, which you probably attributed to instinct or luck, were actually your deceased loved ones working through the subtle channels available to them to continue caring for you? Now, before we go any further, If this video is opening your eyes to a dimension of reality you've been blind to, if you're starting to recognize all the ways your deceased loved ones have been trying to reach you that you've been dismissing, do me a favor. Hit that like button so this message can reach more people who desperately need to hear it. Subscribe to this channel because we're going deep into Edgar Cayce's most transformative teachings, the ones that shatter conventional understanding and reveal spiritual truths that change everything. And turn on notifications because each video builds on the others, creating a comprehensive understanding of your spiritual nature and purpose that you won't find anywhere else. Here's what I need you to understand. Everything I've just described to you, these 5 signs that your deceased loved ones are still with you, still communicating, still loving and guiding you, this isn't offered to you as interesting information to consume and forget. This is meant to fundamentally alter how you navigate your life from this moment forward. Because if you truly accept what Cayce's readings reveal, if you genuinely understand that death hasn't separated you from anyone you've loved, if you recognize that you're surrounded by spiritual support and guidance, trying constantly to reach you, then everything changes. Your grief transforms. It doesn't disappear because loss is real and mourning is necessary and appropriate, but it shifts from the devastating finality of believing they're gone forever to the more bearable sadness of temporary physical separation from someone you know still exists, still loves you, and will be reunited with when your own time comes. The unbearable weight of never speaking to them again lifts when you realize you can speak to them anytime you want, in prayer, in meditation, in simple conversation, and even though you won't hear their voice reply the way you used to, their response will come through dreams, through impressed thoughts, through felt presence, through meaningful synchronicities, through the guidance of your intuition. Your spiritual practice deepens, because now you have concrete motivation to develop the very capacities Cayce emphasized throughout his readings. Meditation isn't just some abstract wellness practice anymore. It's how you create the inner silence necessary to hear the thoughts your loved ones impress upon you. Paying attention to dreams isn't New Age nonsense. It's maintaining the primary communication channel between dimensions. Trusting your intuition isn't irrational. It's honoring the guidance system through which those who love you from spiritual dimensions help navigate you through physical life. Your purpose crystallizes, because if you accept that your deceased loved ones can see your life path more clearly than you can, that they understand your soul's mission and are trying to guide you toward fulfilling it, then the question becomes unavoidable. Are you listening? Are you following the guidance you're receiving? Are you living the life your soul intended and your spiritual support system is trying to help you manifest? Or are you so distracted by material concerns, so locked into others' expectations, so disconnected from subtle reality that you're missing every single attempt to redirect you toward your true path? This is where we arrive at the real reason Cayce's readings on communication with the deceased matter so much. It's not just about feeling less alone in your grief, although that's valuable. It's not just about the comfort of knowing death isn't the end, although that changes everything. It's about recognizing that you're living your physical life embedded in a larger spiritual reality, surrounded by love and support and guidance, part of a vast community of souls that transcends the boundary between physical and spiritual dimensions. And that recognition demands response. You can't unknow this. You can't hear what Cayce revealed and go back to sleepwalking through life assuming you're alone, assuming material reality is all there is, assuming the subtle signs and synchronicities and dreams and intuitions are meaningless. You've been given a map to a treasure you didn't know you had access to, and now you have to decide whether you're going to use that map or pretend you never saw it. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Your deceased loved ones are watching how you live. They see the choices you're making. They observe whether you're fulfilling the potential they believed you had, whether you're honoring the values they tried to instill in you, whether you're living with integrity and purpose, or drifting through days that blur into years of wasted incarnation. And they're trying to help, trying to guide, trying to communicate, but they can't force you to listen. They can't override your free will. They can only offer and wait, and hope that you'll become receptive enough to receive what they're desperately trying to give. So what are you going to do with this information? Are you going to close this video and immediately forget everything you've heard, slip back into the comfortable numbness of materialist assumption? Are you going to remain so terrified of seeming crazy or delusional that you continue dismissing every sign, every dream, every intuition, every moment of felt presence? Or are you going to start paying attention? Are you going to create space in your life for the subtle communications that have been happening all along? Are you going to honor your deceased loved ones by actually listening to the guidance they're offering instead of just wishing they were still here while ignoring their continued presence? This isn't just about your relationship with people who've died. This is about your relationship with reality itself. Because if Cayce's readings are accurate, and everything in my research into his documented cases suggests they are, then you're living in a universe far more mysterious, far more meaningful, far more saturated with consciousness and love and spiritual purpose than the dead. Mechanistic reality, you've been told, is the only thing that exists. You're a spiritual being having a temporary physical experience, surrounded by other spiritual beings at various stages of their eternal journey, all connected, all part of a vast unfoldment of consciousness that doesn't begin at birth or end at death. And if you can accept that, if you can open yourself to that larger reality, then communication with your deceased loved ones is just the beginning. It's the doorway that leads to understanding your own spiritual nature, recognizing your soul's purpose, connecting with the divine consciousness that Cayce accessed in his readings and described as available to everyone willing to seek it. It's the starting point of a spiritual awakening that transforms not just how you grieve, but how you live, what you value, who you understand yourself to be. Before I close, I want to leave you with one more critical insight from Cayce's readings. He was asked many times whether it was spiritually healthy to seek contact with the deceased, whether focusing on communication with those who died could become an unhealthy obsession that prevents people from living fully in the present. And his answer was characteristically balanced. He said that yes, it's absolutely appropriate and beneficial to maintain loving connection with those who've transitioned, to remain open to their guidance and presence, to honor the relationship that continues beyond death. But no, you should never become so fixated on the past or on those who've died that you neglect your present responsibilities, your current relationships, your own spiritual development in this incarnation. The deceased don't want you frozen in grief. They don't want you living in the past. They want you thriving, growing, fulfilling your purpose, experiencing joy, learning your lessons, contributing your unique gifts to the world. And they're trying to support exactly that through their continued contact. So receive their presence as encouragement to live more fully, not as excuse to retreat from life. Let their love fuel your courage to become who you're meant to be, not anchor you to who you used to be when they were physically present. Here's my final question for you, and I genuinely want you to answer this in the comments because your reflection will help others who are processing these same revelations. Knowing what you now know about the 5 signs through which your deceased loved ones communicate, looking back over your life since their death with new eyes, how many of these signs have you experienced? How many dreams dismissed as wishful thinking might have been actual visitations? How many thoughts attributed to memory might have been impressed guidance? How many moments of felt presence explained away as imagination might have been genuine contact? How many synchronicities rationalized as coincidence might have been intentional messages? How many intuitions ignored as irrational might have been steering from those who love you and see more clearly than you can? Count them up. Recognize how loved you are. Understand how much effort your deceased family, friends, and spiritual guides have invested in trying to maintain connection with you despite the barriers, and then make a decision. Will you continue living as though you're alone in a dead universe? Or will you step into the fuller reality Cayce revealed, where death is transition, where love is eternal, where those you've lost are as present and active in your life as you're willing to allow them to be? The choice is yours. It's always been yours, and they're waiting patiently for you to finally, truly listen. Make sure you hit that like button. Subscribe for more of Edgar Cayce's most profound revelations that mainstream spirituality won't touch, and drop a comment sharing your experiences with these 5 signs. Let's build a community of people willing to acknowledge the larger reality we're all embedded in, willing to honor the continued presence of those we love, willing to live as the eternal spiritual beings we actually are, rather than the temporary material forms we've mistakenly identified with. Thank you for being here, thank you for staying open, and may you receive the communications that are coming to you constantly with new clarity and recognition. Your consciousness is most powerful in the moments before sleep, and Edgar Cayce discovered 7 specific words that act as a direct command to your subconscious mind. Words that literally reprogram your reality while your body rests. Most people waste this sacred threshold between waking and sleeping, letting random thoughts dictate what their subconscious creates during the night. But Cayce's readings revealed that the last conscious thought before sleep becomes the blueprint for both your dreams and your waking life. This isn't positive thinking or manifestation theory. This is about accessing the same mechanism Cayce himself used to enter trance states and retrieve information from the Akashic records, a technique he tested for over 40 years with documented, verifiable results. The 7 words he prescribed aren't mystical incantations or religious prayers, but a precise formula that aligns your conscious will with your soul's purpose. And once you understand why these specific words work, you'll realize you've been sleeping through the most powerful creative moment of your entire day. What if the life you're living right now is simply the result of unconscious programming you've been feeding your subconscious every night for years? Drop a comment, sharing what your last thought before sleep usually is. We're building a community of conscious creators here. The human mind operates on 2 distinct levels, and Edgar Cayce spent decades exploring the border between them. There's the conscious mind, the part of you that's listening to these words right now, analyzing, judging, planning. And then there's the subconscious mind, the vast, powerful intelligence that runs your body, stores every memory you've ever had, and according to Cayce's readings, connects directly to the universal consciousness itself. Most people live their entire lives letting these 2 minds work against each other. With the conscious mind setting goals, the subconscious mind sabotages because it's been programmed with contradictory instructions. Cayce discovered something remarkable in his readings. The subconscious mind is most receptive to new programming during 2 specific windows: the moments just before falling asleep and the moments immediately after waking. In these threshold states, the conscious mind's defenses are down, its critical filters temporarily offline. The subconscious is open, waiting, ready to receive instructions. And whatever you impress upon it in these moments becomes the operating system for everything that follows. Your thoughts, your circumstances, your health, your relationships, all of it flowing from the deep programming of the subconscious mind. But here's what most people miss. The subconscious doesn't distinguish between imagination and reality. It doesn't judge whether something is good for you or bad for you. It simply accepts what you give it and goes to work making it real. Feed it worry and fear before sleep, and it spends the night creating neural pathways and thought patterns that generate more worry and fear. Feed it resentment or anxiety, and it sculpts your reality to match those vibrations. This is why Cayce emphasized that the last thought before sleep is literally a prayer. Not in a religious sense necessarily, but in the sense that it's a request you're making to the most powerful creative force available to you. The 7 words Cayce prescribed are deceptively simple. In his readings, he revealed that the most effective pre-sleep programming follows a specific structure, a clear statement of intention that aligns your conscious will with your soul's purpose. The 7 words themselves vary based on what each individual needs, but they follow an essential formula. They must be positive, present, tense, personal, and purpose-aligned. Cayce demonstrated this himself every time he entered a trance state to give a reading. Before allowing his consciousness to separate from his body, he would set a specific intention, a clear instruction to his subconscious about where to go and what information to retrieve. Let's talk about why 7 words specifically. Cayce's readings consistently emphasize the power of 7s, 7 spiritual centers in the body, 7 levels of consciousness, 7 stages of soul development. But practically speaking, 7 words is the perfect length for the conscious mind to hold without effort while drifting into sleep. Too short, and the statement lacks the specificity needed to program effectively. Too long, and you're engaging the conscious mind's analytical functions, which prevents the deep relaxation necessary for subconscious receptivity. 7 words is the sweet spot where intention becomes impression. So what are these 7 words for you? That's not a question I can answer, because Cayce's readings made clear that each person's soul mission is unique. The 7 words that will reprogram your reality are the 7 words that align your conscious desires with your soul's purpose for this incarnation. This is why so many people fail with affirmations and manifestation techniques. They're using generic scripts that might work for someone else's path but have nothing to do with their own. Your subconscious isn't interested in generic success or vague abundance. It responds to authentic soul-level desires, the real reasons you chose to incarnate in this body at this time. Cayce's readings provide us with a framework, though. The 7 words should answer one essential question: who am I becoming? Not who do I want to become, but who am I in the process of becoming right now? This subtle shift in tense is crucial. The subconscious operates in present time. It doesn't understand future goals or past regrets. It only knows what is. So when you tell it, "I'm becoming more patient and loving daily," you're giving it a current identity to build from. When you say, "I want to be successful," you're programming it to perpetually want, to always be in a state of lacking the thing you desire. Here's where this gets even more powerful. Cayce revealed in his readings that the subconscious mind has access to information your conscious mind doesn't. It knows your soul's complete history, every incarnation, every lesson learned and unlearned, every pattern you're carrying from lifetime to lifetime. It knows what you actually need for your spiritual growth, which is often very different from what your conscious mind thinks it wants. So when you program your subconscious with aligned 7-word statements before sleep, you're not just changing your thoughts, you're activating soul-level knowledge and allowing it to guide your daily life. The mechanism works like this. During sleep, your consciousness detaches from the physical body to varying degrees. In light sleep, you're processing the day's events, sorting memories, solving problems. In deep sleep, according to Cayce, your soul travels to other dimensions, meeting with guides, accessing the Akashic records, planning and problem-solving on levels your conscious mind can't perceive. But all of this nocturnal activity happens within the framework of whatever programming you gave your subconscious before you drifted off. That last conscious thought before sleep is like setting the destination in a GPS. Everything that happens during the journey is oriented toward reaching that destination. This is why Cayce was so insistent about conscious preparation for sleep. He didn't just mean saying 7 words and passing out. He meant creating a ritual, a consistent practice that signals to your entire being that you're entering sacred time. In his readings, he recommended reviewing the day with honesty but without judgment, acknowledging where you acted in alignment with your ideals and where you fell short. Not to beat yourself up, but to give your subconscious accurate data to work with during sleep. Then, after this review, you state your 7 words, your intention for who you're becoming, and you release into sleep with that thought held gently in your awareness until unconsciousness claims you. Most people do exactly the opposite. They scroll through their phones until their eyes blur, filling their minds with other people's drama, curated highlight reels, news designed to trigger fear and outrage. They fall asleep with the TV on, letting random images and sounds program their subconscious. Or they replay the worst moments of their day, every slight and frustration, until sleep finally overtakes them, despite the mental chaos. And then they wonder why their lives feel out of control, why they keep manifesting the same problems over and over, why they can't seem to break destructive patterns. If you were going to plant a garden, you wouldn't throw random seeds in random soil and hope something good grows, would you? You'd prepare the soil, choose seeds intentionally, plant them with care, water them consistently. Your subconscious mind is the garden. Sleep is when the growing happens. The 7 words before sleep are the seeds you plant. And most people are planting weeds, worry weeds, resentment weeds, fear weeds, and then complaining when their life doesn't bloom with beauty. Let me give you a concrete example from Cayce's readings. A man came to him suffering from chronic anxiety and insomnia. Cayce traced the condition back to the man's habit of reviewing business problems right before sleep, essentially programming his subconscious to stay alert for threats all night long. The reading prescribed a specific 7-word statement: I rest in peace and wake refreshed. Simple, right? But here's what makes it powerful. First, it's present tense. I rest, not I will rest. The subconscious accepts this as current reality. Second, it addresses both the sleep itself and the waking, giving the subconscious a complete cycle to work with. Third, it replaces the anxiety programming with peace programming, and it does so in language the subconscious can easily translate into bodily experience. The man reported back months later that his insomnia disappeared within weeks, and more surprisingly, his business problems started resolving themselves, not through any conscious effort on his part, but because his subconscious, no longer locked in anxiety mode, was able to access creative solutions that his worried conscious mind had been blocking. This is what Cayce meant when he said, "We change our reality with these words." We're not manipulating external circumstances through magic, we're changing our internal state, which then changes how we perceive and respond to circumstances, which then changes the circumstances themselves. Now, some of you might be thinking, this sounds too simple. How can 7 words really change my life? And that's your conscious mind's skepticism, which is actually its job to analyze and protect. But notice what happens when you hold that skeptical thought as you fall asleep. Your subconscious receives the message, this won't work, change is impossible, I'm stuck. And guess what reality you wake up to? The same one. Not because the technique doesn't work, but because you programmed it not to work. Cayce addressed this directly in his readings. He said that the biggest obstacle to transformation isn't lack of knowledge or technique. It's the habit of using our own minds against ourselves. We say we want change, while simultaneously programming our subconscious to maintain the status quo. We pray for healing while believing we're fundamentally broken. We ask for abundance while identifying as someone who never has enough. The conscious and subconscious minds are at war, and the subconscious always wins because it's more powerful. It has to be. It's running millions of bodily processes right now without your conscious awareness. You can't consciously beat your heart or digest your food or regulate your hormones. The subconscious handles all of that, and it's handling your life circumstances with the same automatic efficiency based on whatever programming it's received. So here's the question you need to ask yourself. What have I been programming? If your life were a perfect reflection of the dominant thoughts you've been thinking before sleep for the last year, would it look exactly like this? For most people, the answer is an uncomfortable yes. Your current reality is your subconscious mind's best effort to manifest the instructions you've been giving it. If you don't like what you're experiencing, you don't need to change your circumstances first. You need to change your programming. This is where Cayce's approach differs from most manifestation teachings. He wasn't telling people to imagine things they don't believe or pretend to be someone they're not. He was teaching alignment, getting the conscious and subconscious minds working together toward the same goal and making sure that goal aligns with your soul's actual purpose for this lifetime. Because you can program yourself for anything, but if it's not aligned with your soul's mission, you'll either fail to manifest it or you'll manifest it and discover it doesn't bring the fulfillment you expected. How do you know if your 7 words are soul-aligned? Cayce gave a simple test in his readings. When you state your intention, your 7 words before sleep, notice how your body responds. Does it relax? Does something in you say, yes, this is true, this is who I am becoming? Or do you feel resistance, tension, a sense of forcing something that doesn't quite fit? Your body is wiser than your conscious mind. It knows when you're aligned with your soul's purpose because alignment feels like peace even if it's challenging. Misalignment feels like strain, like you're pushing uphill. Let me be direct with you about something. Right now, as you're listening to this, you have a choice. You can file this information away as interesting and keep doing what you've always done, falling asleep however you fall asleep, letting random thoughts program your subconscious. Or you can decide that tonight will be different. Tonight you'll review your day honestly. You'll craft 7 words that represent who you're truly becoming, and you'll hold those words gently in your awareness as you drift into sleep. Not with force, not with desperation, but with the calm certainty of someone planting a seed in good soil. If you choose the second path, don't expect instant miracles. This isn't a magic spell, it's a practice, and practices require consistency. Cayce emphasized that the subconscious mind needs repetition to establish new patterns. One night of positive programming after years of negative programming isn't enough. But 30 days of conscious, aligned intention before sleep, that starts to reshape reality. 90 days, that creates fundamental change. A year, that's a completely different life, built from the inside out. But here's what will happen in the meantime, and this is important. When you start consciously programming your subconscious with aligned intentions, your life might actually get more uncomfortable at first. Not worse, but more uncomfortable. Because all the patterns and beliefs that don't align with your 7 words will start rising to the surface to be cleared. Your subconscious is efficient. Once you give it a new directive, it goes to work removing obstacles to that directive. And sometimes you are your own biggest obstacle. The victim stories you tell yourself, the limiting beliefs you inherited from your family, the fears you've been nursing for years, all of it will come up to be examined and released. This is growth, not failure. But if you don't understand what's happening, you might quit right when you're on the verge of breakthrough. Cayce saw this in his own life and in the lives of thousands of people he gave readings for. The moment you commit to conscious evolution, your soul accelerates your growth. It starts arranging circumstances that force you to confront whatever you've been avoiding. This isn't punishment, it's efficiency. Your soul knows you're finally ready to do the work, so it stops protecting you from lessons you need to learn. And those lessons often come through challenge. The 7 words before sleep don't protect you from challenge. They align you with your purpose so that every challenge becomes an opportunity for soul-level growth rather than random suffering. Think about Cayce himself. He spent the first half of his life confused about his abilities, afraid of them, trying to live a normal life despite having access to extraordinary levels of consciousness. The readings he gave told him over and over, "You incarnated to use these gifts in service to others." But his conscious mind resisted because using his gifts meant accepting a life that looked very different from what he'd planned. It wasn't until he fully surrendered to his soul's purpose, until his conscious and subconscious minds finally aligned, that his life began to work. Not in the sense of being easy or comfortable, but in the sense of being meaningful, of fulfilling the exact mission his soul came here to accomplish. You have a mission too. Maybe not as dramatic as Cayce's, but equally important in the grand design of consciousness evolution. Your soul chose to incarnate in this body, in this time period, in these specific circumstances, because there's something only you can do. Some way you're meant to serve, some lesson you're meant to learn, some corner of consciousness you're meant to illuminate. And every night that you fall asleep unconsciously without intention, you're delaying that mission. Not permanently, your soul is patient, it has eternity. But in terms of this lifetime, this specific opportunity to grow and serve, you're wasting precious time. So what are your 7 words? Not what do you think they should be, not what would sound good to other people, but what does your soul actually need you to become? Maybe it's I speak my truth with love and courage. Maybe it's I release the past and embrace my purpose. Maybe it's I am becoming whole, healed, and helpful daily. The specific words matter less than the authenticity behind them. Your subconscious knows when you're lying. It knows when you're reciting something you don't believe. Feed it truth, even if it's uncomfortable truth, and it will work miracles with that truth. Before we wrap this up, I want you to understand something crucial about Cayce's teachings. He never presented himself as special or unique in his abilities. In his readings, he consistently emphasized that every person has access to the same universal consciousness he accessed. The only difference is that he learned to align his conscious and subconscious minds, to program his intention clearly before entering trance states, to cooperate with his soul's purpose, rather than fighting it. These 7 words before sleep, this is the same technique, simplified for everyday use. You're training yourself to do what Cayce did, to use your consciousness intentionally, to program your reality rather than living on autopilot. If this video has challenged you, if it's made you uncomfortable with how unconsciously you've been living, that's good. That discomfort is your soul telling you it's time to wake up, not just from sleep, but from the waking sleep most people call normal life. The sleepwalking through days without intention, the passive acceptance of whatever circumstances drift your way, the hope that somehow, magically, things will improve without you having to change the fundamental patterns that created your current reality. Hit that like button if you're ready to take responsibility for what you're creating. Subscribe if you want to continue exploring Cayce's teachings and learning how to align with your soul's purpose. And drop a comment below with the 7 words you're committing to tonight. Not to share with me, I don't need to know, but to make a declaration to yourself, to your own soul, that you're done sleeping unconsciously. That from tonight forward, you're programming your reality with intention. Because here's the final truth from Cayce's readings. You are always creating your reality. The question isn't whether you're doing it. The question is whether you're doing it consciously or unconsciously. 7 words before sleep won't change your life by themselves, but 7 words spoken with soul-level authenticity, repeated consistently while you do the necessary work in your waking hours, that changes everything. That's not positive thinking. That's conscious creation in alignment with divine purpose. Are you living the life your soul intended when it chose to incarnate in your body? Or are you living the life your unconscious programming has defaulted you into? These are the questions you need to be asking yourself, not once, but every single night before you close your eyes. Because every night is a new opportunity to plant different seeds. Every night is a chance to reprogram. Every night is an invitation from your soul to finally align your conscious will with your divine purpose. The 7 words are waiting. Your subconscious is ready, your soul has been patient. What are you waiting for?